Caroline had been dancing alone in the ballroom for maybe 2 minutes when she felt it, that electric shift in the air that meant she wasn't alone anymore. She kept dancing anyway. After 3 years of making herself invisible, being seen felt dangerously good. What she didn't know was that the man watching her from the shadows already knew exactly who she was, and he'd been looking for her for a very long time. The Botany estate occupied 47 acres of upstate New York countryside, the kind of property that housed old money, new power, and people who valued discretion above everything else. Caroline Johnson couldn't normally afford to breathe the air in a place like this. But 6 months ago, Ashley had gotten her the maid position after Caroline's third failed interview at yet another accounting firm. That had been 183 days ago. Now she stood in the grand ballroom at 11:47 p.m., surveying the aftermath of the annual charity gala, crystal champagne flutes abandoned on marble-top tables, gold-rimmed plates stacked by the service elevator. The lingering scent of wealth so old it didn't need to announce itself. Her reflection stared back from floor-to-ceiling windows. Black woman in her late 20s, natural curls pulled back in the regulation bun, wearing the estate's standard uniform, black dress, white apron, comfortable shoes. The dress code was designed to make staff invisible. And for 6 months, Caroline had perfected the art of disappearing. Her phone buzzed. Ashley. Again. The 5th time this month her college roommate had been too busy, too distracted, promising she'd make it up to her. The 5th time Caroline had felt the sting of being the friend who was always understanding, always accommodating, always saying it's fine when it wasn't. She was tired. Tired of being invisible. Tired of being understanding. Tired of pretending that mopping floors in a mansion was somehow better than the career she'd destroyed to do the right thing. Caroline pulled out her earbuds, connected them to her phone, scrolled to the playlist she hadn't touched in 3 years. The one labeled Times Before Everything Went Wrong *. The music started. Something with a beat that made her hips move before her brain could object. Something that reminded her of nights when she'd been Caroline Maxwell, forensic accountant, the woman who could trace money through any system, who'd been called brilliant, who'd had a future. She started clearing the table, but her body was already responding to the rhythm. A sway, then another. Her shoulders rolled, her hips followed. The champagne flute in her hand became part of the movement as she placed it on her tray. And then she forgot about the tray entirely. Caroline Johnson, invisible maid, professional ghost, woman who'd spent 3 years making herself small, began to dance. Not the kind of dancing you do at clubs to be seen. The kind you do alone in your apartment when you think no one's watching. When your body remembers what it felt like to be free, to be confident, to take up space without apologizing for it. Her eyes closed. The ballroom disappeared. The uniform didn't matter. The champagne flutes and marble floors and borrowed wealth all faded away. There was just the music, just the movement, just her body remembering how to feel alive. She spun slowly, her arms lifting, her head tilting back. The chandelier light caught in the crystals above her, throwing fractured rainbows across her brown skin. Her hips moved in ways the uniform was never designed to accommodate. Fluid, sensual, unconsciously graceful. The natural curls she'd pinned back were coming loose, framing her face in a way that made her look younger, less guarded. For 2 minutes, maybe 3, Caroline forgot to be invisible. And then she felt it. That electric shift in the air, the weight of attention, the sensation of being watched that makes your skin prickle with awareness. She should stop. Should snap back to professional Caroline, the maid who keeps her head down and finishes her work and never, ever draws attention to herself. Instead, she kept dancing. Because after 3 years of making herself invisible, being seen felt dangerously good. In the doorway, Nico Battani stopped breathing. He'd come downstairs at 11:45 to check on the cleanup progress before his 1 a.m. conference call with Tokyo. His insomnia meant late nights were productive nights. He wasn't expecting her. The new maid. The one he'd barely noticed in the 6 months she'd been on staff. Ashley had hired her. Something about being an old friend who needed work. He'd signed off without paying attention because he trusted Ashley's judgment, and he had more important things to worry about than domestic staff. But now, she was moving through his ballroom like she owned it. Like the marble floors were hers. Like the chandeliers existed solely to light her performance. Her eyes were closed, her lips slightly parted, her body moving with a confidence that had absolutely nothing to do with cleaning champagne flutes. The uniform should have made it mundane. Instead, it made it more erotic. The contrast between the practical dress and the way her body moved underneath it. Every curve, every roll of her hips, every graceful extension of her arms. Nico's hands clenched at his sides. He'd built an empire on control, on reading people, on maintaining distance between want and action. But watching her dance, this woman who was supposed to be invisible, who'd spent 6 months avoiding eye contact in staff meetings, he felt control slipping away like water through his fingers. For 90 seconds, he stood frozen in the doorway, watching with the kind of want that made rational thought impossible. The kind that made his pulse hammer and his mind go somewhere dark and possessive and entirely inappropriate for an employer watching an employee. Then she turned. The chandelier light caught her face fully. High cheekbones. Full lips. Skin like polished mahogany. Eyes still closed, lost in whatever music was playing through her earbuds. And Nico's entire world tilted sideways, because he knew that face. Not from staff meetings or household schedules or the forgettable blur of domestic employees who kept his estate running. He knew it from news coverage. From a trial he'd followed obsessively 3 years ago. From the woman who'd fascinated him then. Brilliant, brave, self-destructive in her commitment to truth. Caroline Maxwell, the forensic accountant who'd testified against her own firm in the Whitmore fraud case, who'd sent her mentor to federal prison, who'd destroyed her career to expose corruption, who'd disappeared from public life after the trial ended and the news cycle moved on to the next scandal. She'd been here, in his house, invisible, for 6 months. The lust didn't disappear with recognition, it intensified, because now he knew. She wasn't just beautiful, she was brilliant. She wasn't just graceful, she was gutsy enough to burn her entire professional life down for principle. And she'd been hiding extraordinary competence beneath a maid's uniform in his own house. Nico Battani had been looking for someone with her expertise for 2 years. Someone who understood financial crimes. Someone who wasn't bound by conventional ethics. Someone brave enough to operate in the gray zones where law and justice didn't always align. And she'd been here the entire time. Caroline spun again, still lost in her private dance. Still unaware she was being watched. Still moving like she'd forgotten the weight of shame and failure and professional death. Nico should announce himself. Should clear his throat. Should give her the dignity of privacy. Instead, he memorized the way she moved. The arch of her back. The extension of her fingers. The way her head tilted when the music hit a certain beat. He cataloged it all with the same intensity he brought to business negotiations and strategic planning. Because he'd already made his decision. By morning, Caroline Johnson's life as an invisible maid would be over, and Caroline Maxwell's resurrection would begin. Welcome back, my beautiful souls and kindred spirits. Before we start, go ahead and subscribe, like, and share where you're watching from. It always warms my heart to see our little storytelling family stretch across the world. Every click, every comment, every bit of love you give helps us keep uncovering these unforgettable stories together. So find your quiet place. Settle in, and let me take you somewhere you've never been before. Caroline arrived at Nico's office at 8:57 a.m., 3 minutes early because being late felt like giving him more power than he already had. She'd changed out of her uniform into civilian clothes. Dark jeans, a cream blouse, leather jacket that had cost her 2 weeks' salary back when she had a salary worth mentioning. Her hair was down, natural curls framing her face. If this was termination, she'd at least look like herself when it happened. His assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Maria, who'd always been kind, gestured toward the double doors. He's expecting you. Go right in. He'd been awake all night, tracking every record about her he could find until dawn, the insomnia that usually fed his work now burning with something more personal. Caroline's hand trembled slightly as she reached for the handle. She forced herself to breathe. Forced herself to remember that she'd testified against federal prosecutors, had withstood cross-examination from defense attorneys who'd tried to destroy her credibility. She could handle one conversation with her employer. The office was exactly what she'd expected. Massive mahogany desk, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, windows overlooking the estate grounds. What she hadn't expected was the man behind the desk. Nico Batani looked different in daylight. Still devastating. That hadn't changed. But more real somehow. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored to shoulders that didn't need tailoring. His shirt was white, open at the collar. No tie. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it. And his eyes, those almost black eyes that had watched her dance, tracked her movement across the room with an intensity that made her skin heat. "Caroline." He stood, gestured to the chair across from him. "Thank you for coming. Did I have a choice?" The words came out sharper than she'd intended. "Yes." His answer was immediate, absolute. "You always have a choice. With me, you always will." Something in his tone made her believe him. She sat. Nico didn't return to his chair. Instead, he moved around the desk, leaning against it so he was closer to her. Not threateningly close. Just close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something expensive and understated that made her want to lean in. He picked up a manila folder from his desk, opened it. Caroline's stomach dropped. Inside were printouts of news articles. Her face stared back at her from glossy paper. Younger, more confident, standing on courthouse steps. The headlines were brutal even 3 years later. Star witness destroys mentor's career. Forensic accountant's testimony sends Hoffman to prison. Whistleblower or opportunist? Caroline Maxwell. Nico's voice was quiet, almost gentle. "You changed your name." Smart. She couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. Her carefully constructed invisibility was shredding in front of her, and she had no defense prepared. "I followed your trial," he continued, closing the folder. "Obsessively. You fascinated me. Not just what you did, testifying against your mentor, but how you did it. You didn't just report the fraud, you built an irrefutable case. You anticipated every defense strategy. You were brilliant." Caroline found her voice. "I was unemployed. Because you chose truth over career. That's not weakness, Caroline. That's courage most people don't have." "Is this where you fire me?" She lifted her chin. "Because you could have done that via email." Nico's mouth curved slightly. Not quite a smile, more like appreciation. "I'm not firing you. I'm offering you your life back." The words hung between them. Impossible. "My life is cleaning ballrooms and avoiding eye contact," Caroline said flatly. "That's what's left." "No." He pushed off the desk, moved closer. Not into her space, but close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "That's what you've been hiding behind. What I saw last night. That woman dancing like she owned the world. That's your life. I want to hire her." Caroline's heart hammered against her ribs. "To do what?" "What you're exceptional at. Financial investigation, asset recovery, forensic accounting." He paused. "The work I do isn't entirely legitimate. I run hotels, restaurants, import businesses, all legal. But I also provide consulting services for people the system has failed. People who can't go to the police because the police are the problem. People who've been stolen from by partners, spouses, employers who know how to hide money where lawyers can't find it." Understanding dawned slowly. "You want me to help you operate in gray zones. I want you to help me help people who have nowhere else to turn." His eyes never left hers. "The job would pay $200,000 annually plus percentage of recovery on cases. You'd have autonomy, resources, and my complete protection." The number made her dizzy. She'd been making $32,000 as a maid. "Why me?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "There are other forensic accountants, people without my history. Because you've already proven you'll do what's right even when it costs you everything. Because you're brilliant enough to trace money through systems designed to hide it. And because..." He stopped, seemed to choose his words carefully. "I should be honest with you. My interest in you isn't entirely professional." The air in the room changed. Became charged with something electric and dangerous. "What's the other part?" Caroline asked, even though some part of her already knew. Nico's eyes traveled over her slowly. Not crude, not objectifying, deliberate, like he was memorizing her. "I want to know what you look like when you're not pretending to be invisible. I saw you last night. Confident, free, alive. That woman is who I'm hiring. not the maid who keeps her head down, and I'm attracted to her. Intensely. I thought you should know that before you decide. Caroline should stand up, should walk out, should report this to HR. Except Ashley was HR, and Ashley had ghosted her last night like she'd ghosted her 100 times before. Instead, she asked, "If I take the job, does the attraction become a problem?" "Only if you want it to." His honesty was disarming. "I won't act on it without your invitation, but I won't lie about it either. I want you, Caroline. Professionally, absolutely. But also personally, physically, in ways that have nothing to do with work. I'm telling you so there's no confusion, so you can make an informed choice." Her mouth was dry. "And if I turn this down? Then you go back to your shift tonight and I never mention this conversation again. You keep your position. No retaliation. You have my word." He straightened. "But I hope you don't refuse, because watching you dance last night wasn't just attraction. It was recognition. You're extraordinary, and I think you've forgotten that. I'd like to help you remember." Caroline stared at him. This man who'd watched her in her most unguarded moment, who knew her worst professional failure, who was offering her everything she'd lost: career, money, purpose, while admitting he wanted more than just her skills. It should terrify her. Instead, she felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years: possibility. "I need time to think." Her voice was steadier than she felt. "Take all the time you need." Nico reached into his pocket, pulled out a business card, held it out to her. When she took it, their fingers brushed. The contact was brief, accidental, and sent electricity racing up her arm. His eyes darkened slightly, like he'd felt it too. Caroline stood, tucked the card in her jacket pocket, walked to the door, paused with her hand on the handle, glanced back. He was watching her. Still. Always. With that intensity that made her feel exposed and seen in equal measure. "Caroline," his voice stopped her. "Whatever you decide, thank you for dancing. It's been a long time since anything surprised me. You did." She left without responding, but her heart was racing as she walked through the hallways of the estate. Past the other staff. Past the guest rooms and formal dining areas. To her small room on the 3rd floor where the help lived. She pulled out his card. Heavy stock, embossed lettering. Nico Battani. Owner. A phone number. An email address. On the back, handwritten in confident script: "Asterisk, you deserve to be seen." N asterisk. Caroline sat on her narrow bed and stared at those words until they blurred. She couldn't sleep that night. Lay awake thinking about spreadsheets and courtrooms and the way Nico had looked at her like she was something precious instead of something broken. At 3:07 a.m., she pulled out her phone, typed: "Asterisk, 1 case. I'll consult on 1 case only. Asterisk." His reply came within seconds, like he'd been awake too. Asterisk. 1 case. My office. 9 a.m. Asterisk. Caroline set her phone down, closed her eyes, and wondered what version of herself she'd be when she woke up. The elderly Dominican woman's name was Rosa Moreno, and she cried the entire first meeting. Her son, her only child, had died 8 months ago in a construction accident. He'd co-owned a landscaping business with his childhood friend, Patrick Reyes. According to Marcus, the business had debts. Rosa would get nothing. Not even the truck her son had driven every day for 15 years. Caroline sat across from Rosa in Nico's office, listening to the story in fractured English and Spanish that Nico translated seamlessly. She watched Rosa's hands, gnarled with arthritis, clutching a photo of her son, and felt something crack open in her chest. "The books," Caroline said quietly. "I need to see the business books." Patrick Reyes had provided them, confident in his story. 3 leather-bound ledgers and a laptop with QuickBooks files. Nico slid them across the conference table to Caroline. She hesitated. Her hands hovered over the ledgers like they were burning. 3 years. She hadn't looked at a spreadsheet, a balance sheet, a general ledger in 3 years. The last time had been in that courtroom, explaining to a jury how her mentor had stolen $4.7 million from elderly clients, how he'd hidden it in offshore accounts and shell companies, how she'd traced every dollar, every transaction, until there was nowhere left for him to hide. The jury had believed her. The judge had believed her. And everyone she'd ever worked with had abandoned her for it. Her hands shook. Caroline. Nico's voice was low, meant only for her. Rosa had stepped out to use the restroom. To everyone else in the house, she was still Caroline Johnson, the quiet maid who kept her head down. Only Nico ever called her Maxwell, as if saying the name could summon back the woman she used to be. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. She opened the first ledger. The numbers swam for the first 30 seconds. Then training kicked in. Years of education, natural talent, the gift she'd had since childhood for seeing patterns in chaos. The ledgers came into focus. And she saw it immediately. He's lying. Her voice was flat, certain. Patrick Reyes is lying. Nico leaned closer. Close enough that she caught his cologne again. Close enough that his shoulder nearly touched hers. Show me. Caroline's fingers flew across the laptop keyboard, opening files, cross-referencing entries. Look, income deposits here, $47,000 in April. But the corresponding invoices show $63,000 in completed work. Where's the other $16,000? Explain it to me like I'm not a forensic accountant. His voice held respect, genuine interest. He wasn't patronizing her. He wanted to understand. Marcus is skimming. See this. She pointed to a series of transfers. He's moving money to a personal account before it hits the business books. Small amounts. Nothing that would trigger audits. But over 18 months, it adds up. She worked for 4 hours straight. Barely noticed when Nico brought her coffee, exactly how she took it, though she'd never told him. Barely noticed when he sat beside her, watching her work, asking questions that sharpened her thinking instead of interrupting it. When she finally leaned back, she had the complete picture. $340,000, she said. Marcus has stolen $340,000 from his dead partner's widow. He's hidden it across 3 accounts. One in his name, one in his wife's name, one in a business entity that doesn't exist except on paper. Nico's smile was sharp and dangerous. Can you prove it? I already have. She turned the laptop toward him. Complete documentation, timeline, paper trail, everything you need. He looked at her like she'd performed a miracle. You're remarkable. Heat crept up Caroline's neck. She wasn't used to praise anymore. Wasn't used to anyone looking at her work with admiration instead of suspicion. What happens now? She asked. Now we visit Patrick Reyes. The confrontation happened in Marcus's office. A strip mall space between a nail salon and a tax preparation service. Caroline watched Nico work with the same fascination he'd watched her trace money. He wasn't violent, didn't threaten, didn't raise his voice. He simply laid out Caroline's documentation on Marcus's desk and said, You have 48 hours to return the money, all of it. Or I turn this over to the district attorney, and Rosa sues you in civil court. You'll lose the business, your home, and probably your freedom. Marcus's face went gray. I can't. You can. Nico's voice was ice. You've been stealing for 18 months. You know exactly where the money is. Transfer it back, or face the consequences. Marcus looked at Caroline. She met his eyes without flinching. She'd done this before. Sat across from people who'd stolen money, who'd justified it to themselves, who thought they were clever enough to hide it. She'd always been cleverer. 48 hours, Nico repeated. Then he stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked out. Caroline followed. In the parking lot, her hands started shaking again. Delayed adrenaline, that was. She couldn't find the word. Effective? Nico offered. He unlocked his car, a black Mercedes, and opened the passenger door for her. Terrifying, Caroline said, but she got in. The money transferred within 24 hours. All $340,000 plus interest. Patrick Reyes closed his business the same day. When Rosa Moreno came back to sign the paperwork, she hugged Caroline so tightly that Caroline couldn't breathe. Said things in Spanish that Nico didn't translate, but Caroline understood anyway. Thank you. God bless you. You gave me my son back. Later, standing in Nico's office after Rosa left, Caroline felt tears burning her eyes. I forgot, she whispered. I forgot what this feels like. Helping people. Using what I know to make things right. Nico was silent for a long moment, then, You didn't forget. You just stopped believing you were allowed to. She looked at him, really looked at him. This man who'd seen her dancing, who'd offered her a second chance, who was watching her now like she'd done something extraordinary when all she'd done was her job. "Dinner," he said. "Let me take you to dinner, to celebrate." Caroline knew she should say no. Should maintain professional boundaries. Should remember that he'd admitted to wanting her in ways that had nothing to do with balance sheets. "Okay," she said instead. The restaurant was intimate. White tablecloths, dim lighting, private corner table where they wouldn't be disturbed. Wine that Caroline recognized from her old life when she could afford to know wine. They talked about the case first, safe territory, but then the conversation drifted to her education, his childhood, the strange paths that had brought them both to this moment. "My father died when I was 19, Nico said, swirling wine in his glass. "During a business meeting that wasn't really a business meeting. I inherited everything. The legitimate businesses, the complicated ones, the debts and alliances and enemies I didn't know existed. I'm sorry." Caroline meant it. "It taught me something." He looked at her directly. "That power without purpose is just violence. I wanted my work to mean something. To help people who had no one else. Maybe that's naive." "It's not naive." Caroline set down her wine. "It's what I wanted too, before everything fell apart." "Nothing fell apart." His intensity returned. "You chose integrity over career. That's not failure, Caroline. That's strength." The way he said her name made her breath catch. "I've been trying to be professional," Nico continued, his voice dropping lower. "These past few days working together, but I can't stop thinking about you dancing. I can't stop wondering what you'd look like if you let yourself be free in other ways." The air between them thickened. Caroline's pulse hammered in her throat. "Is this part of the job offer?" She needed to know. "No," his answer was firm. "The job offer stands regardless. Your position is secure whether we ever touch or not. This," he gestured between them. "This is separate. I'm telling you so you know. I want you. But I won't act on it unless you want it too." Caroline should stand up, should leave, should draw a line between professional and personal that couldn't be crossed. Instead, she leaned forward, closing the distance between them. "What if I'm not ready to decide yet? Then I'll wait." His eyes were dark with promise. "But Caroline, when you do decide, I don't do anything halfway." The drive back to the estate was silent, charged with possibility. When he pulled up to her building, the staff quarters, he didn't try to kiss her, didn't push, just said, "Good night, Caroline. Thank you for today." She climbed out, legs unsteady, walked to her door, turned back. He was still watching her. Always watching. Caroline went inside, closed the door, and leaned against it. Her entire body hummed with want and fear in equal measure. She'd made her choice. She just needed to be brave enough to act on it. The second case arrived 3 days later. Cryptocurrency fraud. A yoga instructor in Brooklyn whose ex-boyfriend had stolen her savings and converted it to Bitcoin. The woman, Jade, had screenshots of wallet addresses but no idea how to trace the transactions. "I can do this," Caroline said when Nico presented the case. He studied her. "It's technically complicated. Blockchain analysis. You'd need to." "I know what I'd need to do." She was already reaching for the documentation. "I've handled crypto cases before. When she'd been Caroline Maxwell, rising star at Whitmore and Associates. When complex cases were exciting instead of triggering. She didn't realize the difference until she was 3 hours deep into the blockchain data, staring at transaction chains on Nico's second monitor in his private office. It was after midnight. The estate was silent except for the soft sound of his keyboard. He was working on something else, giving her space but staying nearby. The numbers started swimming. Caroline blinked hard, tried to refocus. But the screen blurred, her chest tightened, her breathing accelerated. No. Not now. She'd been doing so well. 3 days of work without incident. 3 days of feeling competent again, of remembering why she'd loved this profession. But her body wasn't listening to logic. Her hands trembled. Her vision tunneled. She stood abruptly, chair scraping. "Bathroom." The word came out strangled. She didn't wait for Nico's response, just walked quickly to the attached bathroom, locked the door, and fell apart. The panic attack hit like a freight train. Her breathing turned ragged, hyperventilating. Her hands shook violently. The bathroom tiles spun. Flashbacks slammed into her. The courtroom, Bradley Hoffman's face when the verdict was read, his daughter crying in the gallery, the reporters outside asking how it felt to destroy a man who'd been like a father to her. Caroline pressed her back against the wall, slid down to the floor. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The numbers and the courtroom and the testimony all tangled together until she didn't know what was memory and what was present. A knock on the door. "Caroline." Nico's voice, calm but urgent. "I'm fine," she managed. The lie was obvious. "Open the door." "No. Just give me a minute." Silence. Then, "I'm coming in. It's locked." The lock clicked. Of course he had keys to his own bathroom. The door opened, and Nico stood there, taking in the scene. Caroline on the floor, tears streaming, shaking like she'd shatter into pieces. He didn't hesitate, didn't ask permission. Just entered the small space and crouched in front of her. "Look at me," he said quietly. "Just me. Not the screen, not the case. Just my eyes." She tried, failed. The panic was too strong. Nico took her hands, gently, carefully, and pressed them flat against his chest. "Feel that? My heartbeat. Breathe with it. In for 4 counts. Hold for 4. Out for 4. His heartbeat steady and strong under her palms. Real, present, alive. "In," he counted. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Out. 2, 3, 4. Caroline focused on his heartbeat, on his voice, on the warmth of his chest under her hands. Slowly, so slowly. The panic receded. Her breathing steadied. The tears stopped. They stayed like that for 20 minutes. Him crouched in front of her, her hands on his chest, both of them breathing in sync. He didn't rush her, didn't try to fix it with platitudes, just held space for her to break. When she finally looked up, embarrassment flooded in. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I can't believe I just..." "Don't." He cupped her face with both hands, his touch gentle. "Don't hide from me. I'm supposed to be professional, competent, not..." She gestured at herself, "falling apart in your bathroom. You are professional. You are competent." His thumbs brushed away the remnants of tears on her cheeks. "You're also human, and you've been through trauma that would break most people. This doesn't make you weak, Caroline. It makes you real." She wanted to believe him, but the shame was still there, bitter and familiar. "I've seen you dancing like you own the world," Nico continued, his voice low and intense. "I've seen you crack financial structures that would stump most professionals. And now I've seen you vulnerable. I want all of it, every version of you." Something in Caroline's chest cracked open. "Why?" "Because you remind me what brilliance looks like when it's unafraid. Not despite your trauma. Because of what you've survived. Because you're brave enough to try again even when it terrifies you." He paused. "My father died during a business meeting. Wrong place. Wrong negotiation. I was 19. For 2 years after, I couldn't enter certain restaurants without dissociating. I'd see the table layouts, smell the food, and I'd be back in that moment when they told me he wasn't coming home." Caroline's breath caught. "How did you survive it?" "Badly at first. Then I found someone who didn't try to fix me, who just sat with me in it until I could breathe again." His eyes never left hers. "Let me do that for you. You don't have to carry this alone." The kiss happened before Caroline made a conscious decision. One moment she was looking at him, the next her mouth was on his. Desperate, hungry. Months of tension released in a single point of contact. Nico kissed her back with equal intensity. His hands moved to her hair, angling her head so he could deepen the kiss. She tasted wine and want and something darker that made her body respond in ways it hadn't in years. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer. The bathroom floor was uncomfortable, the position awkward, but neither of them cared. The kiss was everything, urgent and claiming and real. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Caroline heard herself say, "This is a terrible idea." Nico's smile was sharp and genuine. "Absolutely. We work together. We do. You're my employer. Technically. His thumb traced her lower lip. Are you stopping? Caroline looked at him. This man who'd seen her at her worst and hadn't flinched, who'd held her while she broke, who kissed her like she was precious and dangerous in equal measure. No, she whispered. She pulled him back down, and this time the kiss was slower, deeper. His hands moved to her waist and she shifted closer, until she was practically in his lap on the bathroom floor. When his mouth moved to her neck, Caroline's head tilted back against the wall. His lips traced the line of her throat, found the hollow where her pulse hammered. Every touch made her body hum with need she'd forgotten she could feel. Not here, Nico murmured against her skin. Not on a bathroom floor. He'd promised himself restraint, but some promises only held until you saw the person you made them for. He stood, pulling her up with him. Led her out of the bathroom, through his office, to a door she hadn't noticed before. His private quarters. The penthouse bedroom above his office. The space was beautiful, masculine and clean. Floor-to-ceiling windows showing the estate grounds by moonlight. A massive bed with dark sheets. Everything expensive and understated. Caroline should be nervous, should second-guess, should remember all the reasons this was complicated. Instead, when Nico turned to face her, she stepped into his space, reached up and kissed him again. His control snapped. He pulled her against him, his hands sliding down her back, over her hips, lifting her until her legs wrapped around his waist. He carried her to the bed, laid her down gently, followed her down. They shed clothes between kisses. Her blouse, his shirt. Barriers removed until there was just skin and heat and want. His hands mapped her body with reverence, like he was memorizing every curve, every response. When he touched her, really touched her, Caroline made sounds she didn't recognize. Look at me, Nico said, his voice rough. I want to see you. She met his eyes. Those dark eyes that had watched her dance, that had seen her break and hadn't looked away. And she let him see everything, the desire, the fear, the desperate need to feel alive again. When they finally came together, it was intense and consuming. Not gentle, but not rough. Just honest. Caroline lost herself in the sensation, in the way he moved with her, in the way he whispered her name like a prayer. After, they lay tangled together in the dark, their breathing slowly returning to normal. Nico's arm was around her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat, the same heartbeat that had grounded her during the panic attack. Regrets? He asked quietly. Caroline considered lying. Considered all the professional and personal reasons she should regret this. I should, she finally said. But I don't. His arms tightened around her. Good. Because I'm not done with you, Caroline Maxwell. We're just getting started. She fell asleep listening to his heartbeat, wondering what version of herself she'd wake up as. Morning light streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, and Caroline woke slowly, disoriented. Silk sheets, a bed that wasn't hers. An arm around her waist that belonged to someone who'd seen every part of her just hours ago. Nico. She turned carefully. He was already awake, propped on one elbow, watching her with that intensity that should probably alarm her but instead made her body warm. You're staring, she said, voice rough from sleep. I am. No apology. I'm trying to decide if last night was real or if I imagined it. If you imagined it, I'm having the same hallucination. His mouth curved. Then we're both delusional. He traced a finger down her arm, raising goosebumps. Regrets in the daylight? Caroline thought about it honestly. About professional boundaries and power dynamics, and all the ways this could complicate her newly resurrected career. About how she'd promised herself she'd never be vulnerable again, never let anyone see her break. I should, she said, but I don't. Something in his expression softened. We need to talk about what this means. I know. Caroline sat up, pulling the sheet with her. The room looked different in daylight. Still beautiful, but real. Lived in. Books on the nightstand, a coffee cup on the dresser. This was his private space, and she was in it, naked, having a conversation about boundaries. Nico sat up too, seemed to choose his words carefully. I want to be clear about something. Last night doesn't rewrite your worth here, he said. You earned this long before you ever touched me. You're not here because we slept together. You're here because you're exceptional at what you do. But we did sleep together. Caroline needed to name it. And you're technically my employer. That's complicated. It is. He didn't disagree. Which is why I'm proposing we establish some boundaries. What happens in this room stays private. The staff can't know. Not because I'm ashamed, but because it protects you. If this ends badly, I don't want your professional reputation damaged again. The thoughtfulness of it surprised her. You've thought about this. I've thought about nothing else since I watched you dance. His honesty was disarming. I want you, Caroline, both versions. The brilliant analyst and the woman who moves like music is salvation. But I won't let wanting you hurt you, so we establish rules. At work, we're professional. In private, we're… What? Lovers? Partners? Employer with benefits? Honest, Nico said. We're honest about what we want and what scares us. No games. No pretending this is casual when it isn't. Caroline pulled her knees to her chest, wrapped her arms around them. I don't know if I can do this. Sustain this level of intensity. I've been numb for 3 years. Feeling this much is terrifying. So we'll be terrified together. He moved closer, not touching but near enough that she felt his warmth. You don't have to do this alone. That's what I'm offering. Partnership, professional and personal. Whatever you need. Whatever pace you need to set. And if I need space sometimes, if I have another panic attack and need to hide, then you hide, and I wait. But you don't disappear entirely. You don't make yourself invisible again. His eyes held hers. That's my only rule. You can need distance, but you don't get to vanish. Deal? Caroline extended her hand. Deal. He took it, but instead of shaking, he pulled her forward and kissed her. Slow and thorough and promising things that made her forget about boundaries entirely. The next 2 weeks were a study in contradictions. During the day, they were consummate professionals. Caroline worked in a small office Nico set up for her, complete with secure servers and forensic accounting software she hadn't had access to in years. They took cases together. A woman whose business partner embezzled payroll, a family trying to recover inheritance hidden by a dishonest trustee. Caroline's skills returned like muscle memory, and with them came confidence she'd thought she'd lost forever. Nico treated her expertise with reverence, asked questions that sharpened her thinking, listened when she explained complex financial structures with the kind of attention that made her feel heard instead of tolerated. During client meetings, he deferred to her knowledge, made it clear she was the expert. But at night, everything changed. There were stolen moments between cases. His hand on her thigh during a conference call with a client, hidden beneath the desk. Her distracting him when he worked late, coming into his study and closing the door, kissing him until he forgot whatever he'd been reviewing. The constant awareness of each other, the way they'd catch each other's eyes across a room and feel the pull. They established a rhythm. After hours, she'd come to his quarters. They'd have dinner, sometimes takeout, sometimes meals he'd prepared himself, because it turned out Nico Batani could cook. They'd talk about cases, about childhood, about dreams they'd had before life got complicated. And then they'd end up in his bed, learning each other's bodies with an intensity that should have frightened her. But Nico was patient, attentive. He learned what made her gasp, what made her laugh, what made her forget to be self-conscious, and she learned him too. The scars on his ribs from a business deal gone wrong, the way he held her afterward like she might disappear, the vulnerability he showed when he thought she was sleeping. Tell me something, Caroline said one night, lying in the dark with her head on his chest. Why forensic accounting? Why not hire someone to handle the illegal stuff and keep yourself clean? His hand traced patterns on her spine. Because the illegal stuff is how you hurt people. The legal stuff, that's how you save them. I watched my father operate in both worlds. He was good at the illegal parts, ruthless, effective, but it consumed him, made him paranoid, got him killed. So you chose differently. I chose to use the illegal tools to accomplish legal goals. Asset recovery. Financial investigation. It's a gray zone, but it's where the system fails people most. You understand that better than anyone. She did. Every case they worked reinforced it. The system wasn't designed to help the vulnerable. It was designed to protect the powerful. I need to tell you something, Nico said carefully, about how I see this. Us. Caroline tensed slightly. Okay, I want your brilliant mind at work and your surrendered body in private. His honesty was brutal and beautiful. I want both versions of you, the analyst who can trace money through impossible systems, and the woman who dances like she's free. Is that unfair? Probably. But it's the truth. Caroline processed this, the intensity of it, the totality. You're obsessed. I am. No denial. With your mind, your body, the way you laugh when you solve a particularly complex puzzle, with the fact that you have panic attacks and still show up to work the next day. Yes, I'm obsessed. Does that scare you? It should. Instead, Caroline found herself saying, no. It makes me feel alive. Because it was true. For 3 years, she'd been numb, hidden, safe in her invisibility. Nico's obsession, his refusal to let her hide intellectually or physically, was forcing her back into existence. And it was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. I discovered something, Caroline said, needing to match his vulnerability. When you ask me to explain financial theories while we're in bed, you think I'm testing you? His voice held amusement. At first, yes. Then I realized you actually want to understand. You listen like my expertise matters beyond its utility. Because it does. You're not just useful, Caroline. You're fascinating. Watching your mind work is as compelling as watching your body move. The compliment shouldn't have affected her so deeply. But after years of being reduced to either her testimony or her failure, being seen as a complete person felt revolutionary. She kissed him slowly, deliberately. I don't know if I can sustain this intensity long term, but I want to try. Then we try. His arms tightened around her. Together. But intensity, Caroline discovered, had a cost. The nightmares started the 3rd week. Not every night, but often enough. She'd dream about the courtroom, about Bradley Hoffman's daughter screaming that Caroline had destroyed their family, about reporters asking how it felt to betray a mentor. She'd wake gasping, disoriented, and Nico would be there. Not trying to fix it, not offering platitudes, just present, holding her until the panic subsided. Sometimes they'd talk. Sometimes they'd sit in silence. But he never made her feel broken for it. Tell me about your father, Caroline asked one night after a particularly bad dream. The real story, not the official version. Nico was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, he was meeting with someone about a protection arrangement. Standard negotiation. But the other party brought a 3rd man, someone my father didn't know about. Insurance, they said. My father tried to leave. They wouldn't let him. Caroline's hand found his in the darkness. The official story was a heart attack during a business dinner, Nico continued. Convenient, clean. But I was 19, not stupid. I knew what that meeting was, and I knew that the world he operated in, the violence, the threats, the constant danger, it had finally caught up with him. I'm sorry. So was I. For a long time. Then I decided to do things differently. Use the connections, the resources, the knowledge, but apply it to helping people instead of hurting them. Maybe that's idealistic. It's not. Caroline shifted closer. It's what I wanted too. To use my skills to expose corruption, protect vulnerable people. That's why I testified. And it cost you everything. Not everything. She kissed his shoulder. I'm here. With you. Doing work that matters again. That counts for something. In the dark, Nico's voice was rough with emotion. You don't have to sustain this intensity alone. That's what I'm here for. When it's too much. When the work triggers you. When the nightmares come. When you need to hide. You don't have to do it alone. You understand? Caroline realized she was crying. Not from sadness, but from relief. I don't know how to not be alone. I've been alone for 3 years. I know. But you're not anymore. That's what this is. Partnership. Real partnership. Where we see each other completely. The brilliant parts and the broken parts. All of it. She fell asleep like that, held by someone who'd seen her worst moments and hadn't turned away. Who wanted her genius and her vulnerability in equal measure. Who made her feel like being seen wasn't dangerous. It was salvation. Ashley had texted once after the article about their first case ran. an apology wrapped in nostalgia that came months too late to matter. The woman's name was Elena Rodriguez, and she sat across from Caroline with the kind of exhaustion that came from years of fighting a system designed to protect the powerful. Her ex-husband, a hedge fund manager with political connections, had hidden their marital assets so thoroughly that 3 lawyers and 2 private investigators had failed to find them. Meanwhile, Elena worked 2 jobs to support their children while he lived in a Tribeca penthouse and vacationed in the Maldives. "I know the money exists," Elena said, her voice flat from repeated telling. "I saw the statements before he filed, but his forensic accountant made everything disappear. The court says there's nothing to recover." Caroline reviewed the documents. Offshore trusts, shell companies in the Cayman Islands, corporate structures so complex they looked deliberately designed to frustrate investigation. She recognized the work: sophisticated, expensive, and almost certainly legal. Almost. "There's a way," Nico said from his position by the window. He'd been quiet during most of the meeting, letting Caroline lead, but it requires accessing accounts we don't technically have authorization to view. Caroline's stomach dropped. "Meaning what?" Elena asked. "Meaning we'd need to use methods that wouldn't hold up in court," Caroline said carefully. "We could find the money, document where it's hidden, but the evidence itself would be inadmissible." "But you could find it?" Elena leaned forward. "You could prove he's lying?" "Yes." The word felt like confession. After Elena left with promises to consider their options, Caroline stood at the window, arms crossed, staring at the city without seeing it. "You're angry," Nico observed. "I'm conflicted." She turned to face him. "I testified against my mentor because he broke the law. Because rules mattered more than loyalty or convenience. Now you're asking me to do exactly what I condemned him for." "No." Nico moved closer, his intensity focused entirely on her. "I'm asking you to recognize that sometimes the law fails people. That following rules can be another form of violence when those rules protect abusers. That's rationalization. That's what every corrupt accountant says before they help vulnerable people instead of stealing from them." His voice stayed level, but something sharp edged underneath. "Your mentor stole from elderly clients to enrich himself. This is recovering stolen assets from someone who's weaponizing the legal system. You see the difference. The law doesn't see the difference. Then maybe the law is inadequate." He stopped an arm's length away. "You can refuse. Elena will find someone else, someone with fewer ethical constraints. And her ex-husband will keep his money while she works herself to exhaustion. That's the moral choice you're defending." Caroline's hands clenched. "Don't manipulate me." "I'm not." His honesty was brutal. "I'm asking you to look at what your ethics actually protect. Sometimes the right thing and the legal thing aren't the same." She had no answer that didn't feel like surrender. That night, lying in his bed with the city lights painting shadows across the ceiling, the argument continued. "You're hiding again," Nico said, his hand tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "Behind rules that failed the people you want to help. Don't psychoanalyze me when we're naked." "Why not? You're most honest like this." He shifted, propping himself on one elbow so he could see her face. "You testified against your mentor because rules mattered more than loyalty. Now you won't break a rule even when following it means someone suffers. Which version of you is real?" The question hit like accusation. Caroline turned to face him, anger and desire tangled so tightly she couldn't separate them. "Maybe both versions are real. Maybe that's what makes this impossible. Or maybe you're using ethics as armor." His thumb traced her lower lip. "So you don't have to fully engage with the messy reality of helping people." "That's not fair." "It's accurate." His eyes held hers, unrelenting. "You want to help people, Caroline. You're brilliant at it. But you want to help them within boundaries that keep you safe from moral complexity. That's not courage. That's control." She kissed him to shut him up. Hard, angry, all the frustration of the day channeled into contact. He kissed back with equal intensity, his hand fisting in her hair, angling her head so he could deepen the kiss. They came together with fierce urgency, anger and desire indistinguishable. His hands mapped her body with possessive certainty. She matched him, nails dragging across his back, teeth on his shoulder, taking as much as giving. The intimacy was almost violent in its honesty, neither of them hiding behind gentleness. When they finished, breathless and tangled, The argument hadn't resolved. They lay in the dark, not speaking, the space between them charged with everything unsaid. Caroline stared at the ceiling and hated that he was right. She'd been using ethics as distance, a way to engage with helping people without the risk of becoming what she'd condemned. Safe, controlled, hidden behind rules that absolved her of real moral choice. Nico took the case without telling her. Hired someone she didn't meet, recovered documentation she never saw. Within 2 weeks, Elena's lawyer had enough leverage to force a settlement. The ex-husband, faced with evidence that couldn't be used in court but could destroy him in the press, agreed to terms that gave Elena half of everything. Caroline learned about it when Elena called to thank her, crying with relief. Her children would have stability. She could quit one of her jobs. The nightmare was over. I didn't help with that, Caroline said carefully. Nico told me you couldn't, professionally. But he said it was your analysis that made it possible. Thank you. Whatever you did or didn't do, thank you. After the call ended, Caroline sat in her office, staring at the phone. Her ethical line, the boundary she'd defended so fiercely, would have left that woman trapped, would have prioritized her own moral comfort over Elena's safety. She found Nico in his study, reviewing contracts. The next case like that, she said without preamble. I'll help. I'll do what's necessary. He looked up, his expression unreadable. Then he stood, crossed to her, cupped her face in both hands. That choice, he said quietly. The fact that you struggled with it, that you're making it consciously, that's why you're extraordinary. Not despite your ethics, because of them. Because you think before you act, because it costs you something. That night, he made love to her differently. Slower, more reverent, like she'd revealed something precious by admitting uncertainty, instead of hiding behind certainty. His hands worshipped. His mouth followed the architecture of her body with deliberate attention, his eyes never leaving hers. Afterward, with her head on his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear, Caroline felt the shift between them. She wasn't just accepting his world, she was choosing it, consciously, with full understanding of what it meant. I'm terrified, she whispered into the dark. I know. His arms tightened around her. But you're not hiding. That's everything. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning. Sender name she'd spent 3 years trying to forget, Bradley Hoffman. Caroline stared at her screen, her coffee going cold in her hand. 2 lines. Asterisk, I'm out. Can we meet? I owe you a conversation. Asterisk. What's wrong? Nico's voice came from the doorway. She turned the laptop so he could see. Watched his expression shift. Not alarm, but careful assessment. You don't have to respond. I know. But her finger was already hovering over the reply button. I think I need to. The cafe was neutral territory. Busy enough for safety, quiet enough for conversation. Caroline arrived 15 minutes early, Nico beside her despite her protests. I'm not hovering, he'd said in the car. I'm backup. There's a difference. Now they sat in a corner booth, Caroline's leg bouncing under the table, Nico's hand steady on her knee. Bradley Hoffman walked in looking nothing like the man who dominated her memories. Thinner, gray at the temples, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there in the courtroom. He spotted her, hesitated, then approached. Caroline. His voice was rougher than she remembered. Thank you for agreeing to this. Nico's hand tightened slightly on her knee. Caroline didn't introduce him, didn't need to. Bradley's glance took in the expensive suit, the protective positioning, the obvious intimacy, and understanding flickered across his face. I won't take much of your time, Bradley said, sliding into the opposite seat. I just needed to tell you something, face to face. Caroline waited, her throat too tight for words. You were right. The words came out flat, exhausted. About everything, the fraud, the theft, what I'd become. I spent 3 years in federal prison convincing myself I was the victim, that you'd betrayed me out of ambition or jealousy, that the system had failed me. He paused, stared at his hands. Then, about 6 months ago, I finally let myself look at what I'd actually done, the clients I'd stolen from, the trust I'd violated, the career I'd destroyed. Yours, not mine. Mine deserved destroying. He looked up, met her eyes. You did the right thing, Caroline. You tried to tell me before you reported it. You gave me the chance to come clean. I chose to fight instead. Caroline's vision blurred. I'm working as a bookkeeper now, Bradley continued. For a nonprofit in the Bronx. Helping people file taxes, manage small business accounting, basic work, honest work. It's what I should have been doing all along. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a business card, slid it across the table. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything. I just needed you to know. You didn't ruin my life. You interrupted me from ruining more lives, including my own. The dam broke. Tears Caroline had held for 3 years spilled over, hot and unchecked. Nico's arm came around her shoulders, solid and grounding. I'm sorry, Bradley said quietly. That it cost you everything. That the system punished the whistleblower instead of protecting her. That's not on you. That's on all of us who made you pay for doing what was right. He stood, left the business card on the table, and walked out. Caroline cried in Nico's arms in that busy cafe, not caring who saw, finally releasing the guilt she'd carried like penance. Bradley had needed ruining. The testimony had been necessary. She could forgive herself. The job offer arrived 3 days later. Senior forensic accountant position at Morrison & Hayes, one of the top investigative firms in New York. 6-figure salary, full benefits, complete professional rehabilitation. They'd followed her consulting work, they explained in the formal letter. They'd heard impressive things. Caroline sat in Nico's office, the offer letter spread across his desk between them. You should consider it, he said, his voice carefully neutral. You want me to take it? I want you to have the choice. He leaned back in his chair, eyes unreadable. This is everything you lost 3 years ago. Legitimacy, professional respect, a career that doesn't operate in gray zones. But I think you should shadow there for a week, see what it feels like, make an informed decision. The Morrison & Hayes offices were everything Caroline remembered about legitimate accounting. Glass and steel, ergonomic chairs, compliance protocols, structured hierarchy, professional, ethical, safe. She shadowed senior accountant Marcus Webb for 5 days, watched him work cases that mattered, corporate fraud, embezzlement, asset recovery, all within legal boundaries, all billable at premium rates, all helping clients who could afford $300 hourly fees. On the 3rd day, a woman called asking for help. Her business partner had stolen from their shared account. She couldn't afford the retainer. Marcus was sympathetic but firm. Firm policy required payment up front. Caroline thought about Elena, about Rosa Moreno, about all the cases she and Nico had taken on contingency because the clients couldn't pay. On the 5th day, Marcus invited her to lunch, made the formal offer over salads. We'd love to have you on the team, he said. Your reputation precedes you, what you did. Testifying despite the personal cost. That takes integrity we value here. Caroline looked at him. Earnest, competent, operating within systems designed to protect people who could afford protection. Good work, important work, just limited. Can I think about it? She asked. Of course, take your time. That night, Nico was different, tense. He poured wine with controlled precision, his movements careful in a way that signaled restraint rather than relaxation. How was the firm? He asked. Professional, legitimate, everything I used to want. But, Caroline set down her glass. If I take that job, we'll have to end this, won't we? The muscle in his jaw tightened. The conflict of interest would destroy you professionally. I won't let that happen. So this is an ultimatum. Safe career, or you. No. He moved closer, his intensity focused and sharp. This is honesty. I want you to stay. I want you to choose this work. Choose me. Choose the messy, complicated reality we've built. But I need you to choose it freely. I need to know you're not staying because it's easier or because you're afraid to leave. That's manipulative. It's honest. His hand cupped her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone. I want you, Caroline. Professionally, personally, completely. But I won't trap you with desire or dependence. You walk into that legitimate firm, you'll have everything you lost. Except me. Except this. His kiss was claiming, possessive, edged with something that felt like desperation. Caroline kissed back with equal intensity, anger and want tangled together. "I hate that you're making me choose." "I hate it too." His forehead pressed against hers. "But you need to, for yourself, not for me." That night, the intimacy was different. Urgent and almost frantic, both of them trying to memorize what might be lost. His hands traced her body like he was committing her to memory. She matched him, refusing to be passive, claiming him back, neither of them speaking because words would make the choice too real. After, lying in the dark, Caroline made her decision, not because staying was easier, because leaving, going back to legitimate work within safe boundaries, helping only people who could afford help, that felt like hiding again, like choosing comfort over courage. She'd spent 3 years numb. Nico had made her feel alive. The work they did, messy, legally questionable, actually effective, that mattered more than legitimacy. "I'm staying," she said into the darkness. His arms tightened around her. "You're sure?" "I'm choosing. The work that matters. The gray zones. You." She turned to face him. All of it, consciously. His kiss was different this time. Reverent. Grateful. Like she'd given him something precious instead of just making a choice. The Toussaint family sat in Nico's conference room with the kind of dignity that came from surviving impossible grief. Marie Toussaint. Late 50s. Haitian accent still strong after 30 years in America, held a photograph of her daughter. Nadine was 23, she said, her English careful and precise. Nursing student, she was walking home from the hospital when the car hit her. The driver, Bradley Ashford, son of a real estate developer, had been drunk, texting, doing 60 in a residential zone. He'd served 6 months in county jail. The wrongful death civil suit should have provided the Toussaints with settlement enough to cover Nadine's funeral, her student loans, something. Except the Ashford family had made their assets disappear. "The lawyer says there's nothing to recover," Marie's husband Jean, Claude said. "The court awarded us judgment, but they say the family is insolvent. We know this is not true. But we cannot afford investigators, cannot afford to fight." Caroline looked at the financial documents they'd managed to gather. Corporate structures spanning 3 states, trusts in Delaware and Nevada, property held through LLCs with anonymous beneficial owners. The work was sophisticated, expensive, and clearly designed to frustrate exactly this kind of judgment enforcement. It was also the most complex case she'd handled since her days at Whitmore and Associates. "How long?" Nico asked her quietly. Caroline studied the documents, her forensic accountant brain already mapping connections. 3 weeks, maybe 4, if I can access the records I need. You'll have everything, whatever you need. The investigation consumed her. Caroline worked 16-hour days, tracing corporate registrations and property transfers, following money through shell companies and nominee shareholders. Nico worked beside her, not doing the analysis but supporting it. Coffee at 3 in the morning, questions that sharpened her thinking. The steady presence of someone who believed she could do this. They fell into rhythm. Professional partnership seamless and total. She'd explain a particularly complex corporate structure, and he'd ask exactly the right question to help her see the pattern. He'd review contracts while she mapped transactions, both of them working in companionable silence, broken only by occasional insights. The sexual tension was constant, but delayed. His hand on her thigh during a late-night review session, a promise of later. Her leaning against him while reviewing documents, feeling his breath catch. Stolen kisses in the elevator between meetings. The awareness that when they finally had time, the release would be intense. 2 weeks in, Caroline found the first major asset. A vacation property in Vermont held through a trust with Jean Ashford's college roommate as nominee trustee. She mapped the connection, documented the ownership chain, felt the familiar rush of pieces falling into place. "There's more," she told Nico that night. "This is just the start." By the end of week 3, she'd uncovered it all. Real estate in 4 states. Investment accounts held through family trusts. Corporate ownership stakes buried in LLCs. $2.3 million in assets the Ashford family had claimed didn't exist. The breakthrough came at 4 in the morning on a Saturday. Caroline stared at her screen, seeing the final connection that made everything clear. and laughed. Exhausted, triumphant, slightly hysterical, Nico looked up from his own work. "You found it. All of it." She turned the screen toward him. "Every asset, every structure, every lie. I can prove the insolvency claim is fraudulent." He crossed to her, pulled her up from the chair, and kissed her hard. "You're extraordinary." They presented the documentation to the Toussaint's lawyer on Monday morning. Watch the attorney's expression shift from skepticism to amazement as he reviewed Caroline's analysis. "This is meticulous," he said. "This is going to force settlement." 2 weeks later, the Ashford family agreed to pay the full judgment rather than face additional fraud charges. The Toussaints walked out of the lawyer's office with a check that wouldn't bring their daughter back but would honor her memory, pay off her student loans, establish a scholarship in her name. Marie hugged Caroline so tightly her ribs compressed. Said something in Creole that Caroline didn't understand but felt anyway. Outside, standing in the parking lot, Caroline realized she was shaking. Not from panic this time. From release. 3 weeks of intensity. Of pushing herself professionally in ways she hadn't since the trial. Of reclaiming not just her skills but her confidence in them. "You did that," Nico said quietly. "You gave them justice the system couldn't." But 2 days later, a quiet inquiry came from a federal IP address. Caroline stared at the subject line. Asterisk, re, Toussaint v. Ashford financial documentation. Asterisk. She didn't open it. Instead, she deleted the email, cleared her trash folder, and sat with the weight of what she'd just done. She'd crossed the line, not just philosophically, but practically. And covering her tracks made her complicit in ways that went beyond consultation. That night felt like celebration and reckoning together. Champagne in his penthouse, Manhattan lights spreading below them like promise. The 3 weeks of delayed tension finally given permission to release. He undressed her slowly, reverently, his hands mapping the body he knew intimately, but approached like discovery anyway. She matched his intensity, refusing to be passive, claiming him back with equal hunger. When they came together, it was both familiar and new. The comfort of knowing each other, combined with the electricity of truly seeing each other. After, tangled in expensive sheets, the city lights painting patterns across their skin, Nico pulled her close. "I need you to know something," he said, his voice rough with honesty. "This started because I wanted you. That hasn't changed. I still want you constantly. But it's not just that anymore. I need you. Your mind, your ethics, your courage. You make me better. The work we do is better, because you're part of it." Caroline's chest ached with the weight of being seen so completely. "You make me feel alive. For 3 years I was numb, hiding, surviving. You wouldn't let me hide. Not my intelligence, not my body, not my capacity to feel. I was terrified of you. I'm still terrified. But I choose this. I choose you. I choose the messy, complicated, legally questionable work that actually helps people." His kiss was answer and promise together. They made love again. Slower this time, less urgent, both of them taking time to memorize what they'd built together. But later, while he slept, Caroline lay awake thinking about that deleted email, about the line she'd crossed, about the person she was becoming in the gray zones. She wasn't hiding anymore. But she wasn't sure she recognized herself either. Morning light found them tangled together, exhausted and satisfied. Caroline woke to find Nico already awake, watching her with that intensity that should probably concern her but instead made her feel precious. "I turned down the Morrison and Hayes offer," she said without preamble. "Formally, yesterday." His expression shifted. Relief and something deeper. "Are you sure? Stop asking me that." She propped herself on one elbow. "I'm sure. I spent 3 years punishing myself by hiding. You didn't let me hide. Not my intelligence, not my body, not my capacity to feel things. You've been obsessed with me, and it should scare me. But it doesn't. Because your obsession sees me completely. All the broken parts and all the brilliant parts. I'm not defaulting. I'm choosing. I'm choosing the work that matters, and I'm choosing you." His response was a bruising kiss, claiming, possessive, grateful. "Then you're mine. Professionally and personally. I don't share, Caroline." "Good." She kissed him back with equal intensity. Neither do I. Within a month, they'd formalized what had been operating informally. Botany Maxwell Consulting, a legitimate business entity operating in creative legal gray zones. They'd filed under a broad consulting and recovery license. An accountant's sleight of hand that kept regulators satisfied without revealing purpose. They specialized in asset recovery for clients. The traditional system failed. Took cases on contingency for people who couldn't afford upfront fees. Nico provided capital and connections. Caroline provided expertise and legitimacy. The first day in their new office, a renovated brownstone in Carroll Gardens. Nico pulled her into the private office, locked the door. "This is ours," he said, backing her against the desk. "Everything we build from here, we build together, equal partners. Equal partners who can't keep their hands off each other. That's not a flaw in the business model." His mouth found her neck. "That's a feature." They christened the office with intense, desperate intimacy. Her perched on the desk, his body between her thighs, both of them aware this was marking territory, claiming space, making official what had started with her dancing in his ballroom. But 3 days later, an article ran in the business section. Caroline found it over morning coffee. Asterisk the shadow accountants. Anonymous sources question. Unorthodox recovery methods. Asterisk. The piece didn't name them directly, but the implications were clear. Clients getting results traditional investigators couldn't achieve. Methods that existed in legal gray zones. Whispers of technology used without proper authorization. Nico read it over breakfast like a weather report. It was inevitable. We're too effective for people not to notice. "This could destroy us," Caroline said, her hands trembling slightly around her coffee cup. "One investigation, one subpoena. Then we'll be careful." He reached across the table, covered her hand with his. "We've always known this work exists on a knife's edge. That doesn't change what it accomplishes." Caroline thought about Rosa Moreno, about Elena Rodriguez, about the Toussaint family, people who'd had nowhere else to turn. The federal inquiry she'd deleted never resurfaced, but sometimes she woke at 3 a.m. certain it would. Proof that even silence leaves evidence. "I need you to understand something," she said quietly. "When I testified against Bradley, I believed the system would protect whistleblowers, that doing the right thing mattered more than protecting yourself. I was wrong. The system punished me for telling the truth. So now I'm operating outside it. But that doesn't mean I'm comfortable with it. I know." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "Your discomfort is why this works. The day you're completely comfortable breaking rules is the day we become what you condemned. Your conscience keeps us honest." 3 months after they opened, a journalist contacted Caroline directly. Allison Cross from The Times, investigating alternative financial recovery services. She wanted to talk. Caroline met her at a coffee shop in Brooklyn. Nico's warning echoing in her head. "You don't have to do this. We can refer her to our lawyer." But hiding felt like cowardice. Allison was younger than Caroline expected. Early 30s, sharp eyes, recording app already open on her phone. "Thank you for meeting me. I've been following your career since the Whitmore trial. That was 3 years ago. I'm not that person anymore. Aren't you?" Allison leaned forward. Caroline Maxwell testified because the system failed. Now she operates in gray zones because the system still fails. "That's the story I'm interested in." They talked for 2 hours. Caroline didn't incriminate herself or Nico, but she didn't hide either. She talked about clients who couldn't afford $300 hourly rates, about assets hidden so thoroughly that legal discovery missed them, about the choice between following rules that protected abusers or breaking rules that helped victims. "So you're admitting you operate outside legal boundaries?" Allison asked. "I'm admitting the legal boundaries are inadequate." Caroline met her eyes. "The system is designed to protect people with resources. Everyone else gets platitudes about justice. I chose to be useful instead of ethical. Maybe that makes me a hypocrite, but it helps people who have nowhere else to turn." The article ran 2 weeks later, not a hit piece. Allison had written something nuanced, questioning whether legal frameworks serve justice or protected power. Caroline and Nico were named, their work described, their clients' testimonials included. The response was immediate. 3 new client calls within hours, 2 lawyers threatening investigation. One message from Bradley Hoffman. Asterisk proud of you. You're doing what I should have. Using your skills to help instead of hide. B asterisk. That night, Caroline stood on the back deck of the brownstone they now shared, watching the city lights. Nico came up behind her, wrapped arms around her waist, and they stood in comfortable silence. No regrets? He asked. Caroline thought about the legitimate career she'd turned down, the safe path she'd rejected, the decision to operate in gray zones, to let herself be seen completely, to trust someone enough to be vulnerable. None, she said. This is exactly where I'm supposed to be. 6 months later, they hired Maya Torres. 25. Brilliant. Recently fired from a Big Four accounting firm for questioning ethics violations she'd discovered. Caroline saw herself in Maya's guarded intensity, her need to prove herself, her fear that one mistake had ended her career. It hasn't, Caroline told her during the interview. It's just redirected you somewhere you might actually help people. Training Maya became Caroline's unexpected passion, teaching her to trace money through shell companies, to recognize patterns in seemingly clean books, to understand when rules served justice and when they protected corruption. But Maya questioned everything. Asked uncomfortable questions Caroline had learned to stop asking herself. Is this legal? Maya asked during her second week, reviewing documentation Caroline had assembled for a contested divorce case. Caroline smiled faintly. That's not the question we ask here. The question is, does it make things right? Maya's skepticism was visible. But if we break the law to help someone, aren't we just proving their ex-husband right? That rules don't matter? The challenge made Caroline pause. Made her think about the line she'd crossed, the person she'd become. Rules matter, Caroline said carefully. But so does justice. And sometimes they're not the same thing. The system failed these people. We're fixing what the system broke. Maybe that makes us criminals. But it also makes us necessary. Later, repeating that conversation to Nico, Caroline felt the weight of her own words. She's right to question, Nico said. They were in bed, his arms around her. Manhattan spread below them like evidence of empire. The day we stop questioning is the day we become corrupt. I deleted a federal inquiry email last month. The confession came suddenly. After the Toussaint case, someone was asking questions about our documentation methods. I deleted it without reading it. His arms tightened around her. You're afraid. I'm complicit. She turned to face him. I crossed my own line, Nico. The one I swore I'd never cross. And the worst part? I'd do it again. Because that family got justice. Because Nadine Toussaint's death meant something instead of nothing. So what does that make me? Human. His hand cupped her face. You're not hiding behind rules anymore. You're making actual moral choices. Messy, complicated, costly choices. That's not corruption. That's courage. Or it's how corruption starts. How do we know the difference? We keep questioning. We keep seeing the cost. We remember why we do this. His eyes held hers, dark and intense. My father stopped questioning. He convinced himself the violence was necessary, the threats justified. He lost himself in the gray zones. But you're still afraid. You still feel the weight of every boundary we cross. That fear keeps us honest. A year after they opened, Batani Maxwell Consulting occupied 3 floors of the Carroll Gardens brownstone. 5 employees, including Maya. Cases ranging from simple asset traces to complex international fraud investigations. A reputation for getting results traditional investigators couldn't. Caroline stood in the conference room late one evening, reviewing financials with Nico. Business licenses on the wall. Her restored professional credentials beside them. She'd successfully petitioned to reclaim her original name, to stop hiding behind the alias she'd adopted in shame. We're legitimate, she said, almost wondering. Strange how that works. We operate in gray zones, but we're registered, licensed, paying taxes. That's the beauty of it. Nico came up behind her, arms sliding around her waist. We exist in the space between legal and illegal. We help people the system fails, but we do it through structures the system recognizes. Does that make it better or worse? It makes it sustainable. He turned her to face him. We're not criminals, Caroline. We're people who understand that law and justice aren't always the same thing. We've built something real here. Something that matters. She kissed him slowly, deliberately. I never want to lose this. The work that matters. The partnership. You. You won't. His response was fierce. We built this together, equal partners in every way. My obsession with you hasn't dimmed. It's deepened. I look at you during client meetings and still can't breathe. I watch you work and fall more in love with your mind. I hold you at night and wonder how I existed before you. Love? The word caught her off guard. Love. No hesitation. I'm in love with you, Caroline. Have been since I watched you dance. But I'm in love with all of you now. The genius and the trauma, the courage and the fear, the woman who testifies against mentors, and the woman who deletes federal emails to protect people. All of it. Tears burned her eyes. I love you too. I didn't think I could feel this much after everything. But you made me feel alive. You made me believe being seen completely wasn't dangerous. It was necessary. That night, their intimacy was different. Tender and fierce together. Celebration and promise combined. His hands worshipped her body with familiar reverence. She met him with equal passion, neither of them hiding, both of them completely exposed. After, tangled in sheets, the city lights painting patterns across their skin, Caroline felt the rightness of it. They'd built an empire on moral complexity, on choosing to help instead of hide, on refusing to let the system's inadequacy become an excuse for inaction. 3 years ago, she'd been invisible. A maid hiding from her past, convinced she'd destroyed her only chance at meaningful work. Now she was Caroline Maxwell again. Forensic accountant, business owner, partner in every sense of the word, seen completely by someone who loved her, not despite her complexity but because of it. Sometimes the best decisions are the reckless ones, she murmured into the dark. Nico's arms tightened around her. And sometimes being seen is exactly what you need to feel alive. They'd built something together in the gray zones. Professional empire and personal salvation intertwined. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't entirely legal. But it was real, and it mattered, and it helped people who had nowhere else to turn. Caroline fell asleep listening to his heartbeat, the same rhythm that had grounded her during her first panic attack in his bathroom. The same steady presence that had held her while she broke and rebuilt herself. She wasn't hiding anymore. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. Seen, wanted, loved, and whole. Building empire in the shadows. Dancing in the light. And somewhere beyond the light, the shadows waited. Proof that even the cleanest empire leaves a trace. If this story made you feel something, if Caroline's resurrection resonated, if Nico's obsession felt both dangerous and right, if their partnership in the gray zones spoke to something in you, drop a comment telling me your favorite moment. Share this with someone who believes in second chances and dangerous love. And remember, you deserve to be seen completely. Broken parts, brilliant parts, all of it. That's not just romance. That's revolution. This is Caroline and Nico's story. A dance in the dark that became a partnership in the light. Thank you for listening. Until next time, keep choosing the reckless thing. It might just save you.